The mall was a hive of activity, a labyrinthine complex of shops, cafes, and kiosks that buzzed with the cacophony of commerce. Shoppers meandered through the polished corridors, their conversations blending into a constant hum. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon pretzels and freshly brewed coffee. It was peak hour on a Saturday afternoon, and the place was teeming with people. The bright, artificial lights reflected off the glossy tiles, and festive decorations hung from the ceiling, giving the entire space a vibrant, almost chaotic energy. I had come to the mall alone that day, eager to take advantage of the sales and perhaps indulge in a bit of retail therapy. My name is Lily, and at 26 I found shopping to be a welcome distraction from the monotony of my 9-to-5 job. Walking through the mall, I felt a sense of freedom, an opportunity to lose myself in the crowd and forget about my worries for a few hours. I weaved through the sea of shoppers, making my way to my favorite stores. There was something comforting about the familiarity of the mall, the predictability of the experience. Yet, as I wandered from store to store, trying on clothes and browsing the latest gadgets, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started subtly, like an itch at the back of my mind. As I sifted through racks of clothes, I felt the prickling sensation of being watched. I glanced around, but no one seemed to be paying me any attention. Dismissing it as paranoia, I continued shopping, but the feeling persisted. While I was at a makeup counter, I noticed a man standing a few feet away, his eyes fixed on me. He was nondescript, blending into the crowd with his plain clothes and average build. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and he quickly looked away, pretending to examine a display. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but convinced myself it was just a coincidence. As I moved to different stores, I saw him again, lingering in the background. He never approached me, but his presence was unnerving. Each time I looked up, he seemed to be there, hovering on the periphery of my vision. My heart rate quickened, and I decided it was time for a break. I headed to the food court, hoping to lose myself in the throng of people. I sat down with a coffee, trying to calm my nerves. The bustling atmosphere of the food court was a welcome distraction, but it didn't take long before I spotted him again, sitting a few tables away, staring at me over the rim of his cup. Panic began to set in. I texted a friend, hoping to meet up with someone, anyone, who could offer some sense of safety, but she was unavailable. Determined not to let fear ruin my day, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I stood up and walked directly past his table, heading for the exit. I didn't look back, but I could feel his eyes on me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I made my way to a quieter part of the mall, hoping to lose him in the maze of stores. But he was relentless. Every time I thought I had lost him, he would reappear, always at a distance, but never far enough to ease my anxiety. The feeling of being hunted grew stronger with each passing minute. I ducked into a bookstore, hoping to find refuge among the shelves. As I pretended to browse, I saw him through the gaps in the bookshelves, his eyes scanning the store. He was looking for me. My breath caught in my throat as I ducked down, using the shelves as cover. I needed to get out of there, but I didn't want to lead him to my car. My mind raced, trying to think of a safe place within the mall where I could go. The restroom sign caught my eye, and I hurried towards it, hoping to find some temporary sanctuary. The corridor leading to the restrooms was empty, and I slipped inside, locking myself in a stall. I sat on the toilet seat, my heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. The silence was deafening, and I strained to hear any sound that might indicate he had followed me. Minutes passed, and I began to feel foolish for hiding. Maybe he had given up and left. Gathering my courage, I unlocked the stall and stepped out. The restroom was empty, and I sighed in relief, heading to the sink to splash water on my face. The door creaked open, and I froze. He stepped inside, his eyes locking onto mine in the mirror. My blood ran cold. He didn't say a word, just stood there, blocking the exit. I backed away, my mind racing for a way out. "Why are you following me?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You dropped this," he said, holding up a small, insignificant trinket that I hadn't even realized I had lost. Relief flooded through me for a split second before my instincts screamed that something was wrong. I had to get out of there. Without thinking, I lunged for the door, but he was quicker. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "Let me go," I yelled, struggling to break free. His expression twisted into something darker, more sinister. "Calm down," he hissed. "You're making a scene." I kicked at him, adrenaline surging through me. He stumbled back, and I seized the opportunity, yanking the door open and fleeing down the corridor. I didn't look back, sprinting through the mall, dodging shoppers who looked at me in confusion. I didn't stop running until I reached the security office. I burst in, gasping for breath, and the officers sprang into action. They took my statement and reviewed the security footage, but the man was gone. The police were called, and I spent hours recounting the events, my mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The incident left a lasting mark on me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the memory of his grip on my arm haunting my dreams. The mall, once a place of comfort and distraction, had become a site of anxiety and fear. I found it difficult to go out alone, always looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him lurking in the shadows. I sought help, talking to a therapist who helped me process the trauma. It was a long journey, but slowly I began to reclaim my sense of safety. I learned to trust my instincts, to be more aware of my surroundings, and to speak up when something didn't feel right. The mall increased its security measures, installing more cameras and hiring additional guards. The incident served as a grim reminder of the dangers that can lurk in seemingly safe places. For me, it was a lesson in vigilance and the importance of listening to that inner voice that warns of danger. Years later, I still think about that day. The fear has faded, but the memory remains, a constant reminder to stay alert and trust my instincts. The man was never caught, and I sometimes wonder if he's still out there, watching and waiting for his next target. But I refuse to live in fear. I've reclaimed my life, my sense of security, and I won't let him take that from me again. In the end, I've become stronger, more aware, and more resilient. The experience taught me that evil can lurk anywhere, but it also showed me the strength within myself to overcome it. I'll never forget that day, but I've learned to live with it, using it as a reminder to stay vigilant and protect myself from the unseen dangers that can lurk in the most unexpected places. The Rivergate Mall used to be the crown jewel of our town. It was the place where families spent their weekends, where teenagers hung out after school, and where you could always find something exciting to do. But those days were long gone. Now it was a shadow of its former self, with more shuttered stores than open ones. The once vibrant food court was now a ghost town, with only a few fast food joints struggling to stay in business. The air always seemed stale, and the once bright lights now had a dim, flickering quality, as if they too had given up. I had heard rumors about the abandoned wing of the mall, the part that had been closed off for years. It was said to be haunted, and though I didn't believe in ghosts, I couldn't resist the pull of a good mystery. The idea of exploring the forbidden section of the mall was too enticing to pass up, so on a gray Saturday afternoon I decided to do just that. My name is Sam. I'm 17 and, like most teenagers, I'm always on the lookout for something to break the monotony of small-town life. Exploring the abandoned wing of Rivergate Mall seemed like the perfect adventure. I told my parents I was going to meet friends at the mall, which was partially true. I did plan to meet up with them later, but first I had some exploring to do. Armed with a flashlight and a backpack containing a few essentials, I made my way to the mall. As I walked through the nearly empty corridors, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for what the place had become. The few people I saw looked as tired and worn out as the mall itself. I made my way past the main concourse and headed towards the east wing, where the no entry signs and yellow caution tape marked the boundary of the forbidden zone. Stepping over the caution tape felt like crossing a threshold into another world. The change was immediate and profound. The hum of the HVAC system, the distant murmur of conversations, and the occasional echo of footsteps all faded away, replaced by an eerie silence. The air was cooler here, and the smell was different, austere, like old books and forgotten places. I shone my flashlight around, illuminating the dusty, deserted storefronts. Mannequins stood frozen in time, their clothes outdated and covered in a thin layer of grime. Some of the store windows were cracked, and a few had shattered completely, their interiors left to decay. As I walked further in, my footsteps echoed loudly, amplifying the emptiness around me. The deeper I went, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. The darkness seemed to close in, and the silence was oppressive, as if the mall itself were holding its breath. Every creak and groan of the building made me jump, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I ventured deeper into the abandoned wing, I started to hear things, soft whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. At first I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I spun around, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever or whoever was making the noise, but I saw nothing. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I had to remind myself to breathe. I kept moving, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear. The whispers continued, accompanied by other sounds. A faint scraping like something being dragged along the floor, and a low, almost imperceptible humming. I came across a store that looked like it had once been a toy shop. The colorful displays were now faded and covered in dust, and the toys looked sad and forgotten. I shone my flashlight inside and froze. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move, but when I blinked, it was gone. I backed away slowly, my instincts screaming at me to leave, but my curiosity pushed me onward. I found myself drawn to the old anchor store at the end of the corridor. It had been a department store, one of the biggest in the mall, but it had closed down years ago. The entrance was partially boarded up, but there was enough space for me to slip through. Inside the store was a labyrinth of empty racks and broken display cases. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I was plunged into darkness. When the light came back on, I saw it. In the center of the store, there was a large circular display that had once held cosmetics. Now it was empty, save for a single old-fashioned music box. It was intricately designed with a porcelain ballerina on top. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They were coming from the music box. I reached out with a trembling hand and opened the lid. The ballerina began to spin, and a haunting melody filled the air. It was beautiful and eerie, sending chills down my spine. As the music played, the whispers became words, forming a chilling message: you shouldn't be here. I slammed the lid shut, but the music continued to play. The whispers turned into screams, echoing through the empty store. I backed away, my flashlight flickering wildly. Shadows danced on the walls, and I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned around and came face to face with a figure. It was a man, or what had once been a man. His clothes were tattered, his skin pale and ghostly. His eyes were hollow, and his mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. "Welcome," he whispered, his voice raspy and cold. "We've been waiting for you." I stumbled backward, tripping over debris and falling to the floor. The figure loomed over me, reaching out with skeletal fingers. I scrambled to my feet and ran, the music and screams following me. I didn't look back, too terrified to see if he was chasing me. I burst out of the abandoned wing, gasping for air. The normal sounds of the mall were a welcome relief, but I didn't stop running until I was outside, the cool air hitting my face like a splash of water. I collapsed onto a bench, my heart racing and my mind reeling. I couldn't shake the feeling of that cold hand on my shoulder, the hollow eyes staring into my soul. I had to tell someone, but who would believe me? I was just a curious teenager with a wild story about ghosts in an abandoned mall. I made my way home, my thoughts racing. I couldn't stop thinking about the whispers, the music box, and the figure. Sleep eluded me that night, and every creak and groan of the house made me jump. The next day I tried to go about my normal routine, but the memory of what had happened haunted me. I decided to do some research, hoping to find some explanation for what I had experienced. What I found only deepened my unease. The anchor store had been the site of a tragic accident years ago. A security guard had died under mysterious circumstances, and rumors of his ghost had circulated ever since. The mall had kept it quiet, not wanting to scare away customers, but those who knew the story believed the guard's spirit still lingered, protecting the place he had once watched over. I realized that I had encountered his restless spirit, and the whispers had been his warning. The mall had tried to forget, to move on, but the past had a way of clinging to places, of refusing to let go. I never went back to the abandoned wing, and I avoided the mall as much as possible. When I did have to go, I stuck to the populated areas, never straying too far from the crowds. The memory of that day stayed with me, a constant reminder of the dangers of curiosity and the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. Years later, I still think about the figure in the abandoned store, the cold hand on my shoulder, and the haunting melody of the music box. I've come to accept that some places hold on to their past, and sometimes it's best to let them be. The experience changed me, made me more cautious, more aware of the unseen forces that can lurk in the shadows. The abandoned wing of Rivergate Mall remained closed off, a silent testament to the stories and whispers that it held. And though the mall continued to decline, with more stores closing and fewer people visiting, the legend of the haunted wing lived on, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie just out of sight, waiting for the curious and the brave. In the end, I learned that some stories are best left untold, some places best left unexplored. The ghosts of the past are always there, waiting, watching, and sometimes they reach out to remind us of their presence. I can still hear the whispers if I close my eyes and listen carefully, a ghostly echo of a day that changed my life forever. Every town has its local legends, and ours was no different. Rivergate Mall, once the bustling center of commerce and social activity, had a dark secret. Amid the cheerful storefronts and food court chatter, there was one store that stood out for all the wrong reasons. It was called Old Man Harvey's Antiques, a store that had been closed for as long as anyone could remember. The shop's windows were perpetually dusty, and the entrance was blocked by yellow caution tape. Most people just walked past it without a second thought, but those who did remember it always spoke in hushed tones about the strange occurrences that had plagued it. The legend had it that the store was haunted. Stories circulated about objects moving on their own, eerie whispers, and the occasional sighting of a shadowy figure. Some said it was Old Man Harvey himself, a reclusive man who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Others believed it was the spirits of the old relics he had collected over the years. Whatever the case, the store had gained a reputation, and it was one that intrigued me and my friends. From the outside, Old Man Harvey's Antiques looked like any other neglected storefront. The windows were grimy, obscuring the view of what lay within, but if you squint hard enough, you could make out the shapes of old furniture, dusty knick-knack-knacks, and ancient-looking decorations. The wooden sign above the door was faded and barely legible, but you could still make out the words Harvey's Antiques. I had always been curious about the store, especially after hearing the stories. The thought of exploring it had crossed my mind many times, but I had never worked up the courage to go in alone. That all changed one crisp autumn evening when my friends and I decided to take a closer look. It was a typical Friday night, and my friends and I were hanging out at the mall, trying to decide what to do. There was me, Alex, a self-proclaimed skeptic and lover of all things paranormal. Emma, the adventurous one who never backed down from a challenge. Jake, the practical joker who always had a grin on his face, and Lisa, the cautious one who often served as our voice of reason. As we strolled past Old Man Harvey's Antiques, Jake nudged me and said, "Hey Alex, why don't we finally check this place out? I mean, we've all heard the stories, but I bet it's just a bunch of junk in there." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "I'm in. Let's see if there's any truth to those ghost stories." Lisa looked uneasy but didn't protest. She knew once we had an idea in our heads, it was hard to dissuade us. "Okay, but let's be careful. We don't want to get into trouble." We waited until the mall started to empty out, the shops closing one by one, and the security guards making their rounds. When the coast was clear, we made our move. We slipped under the caution tape and tried the door. To our surprise, it opened with a creak, as if inviting us in. The moment we stepped inside, the atmosphere changed. The air was thick with dust and an unsettling chill that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Our flashlights cast long, eerie shadows on the walls, and the old wooden floor creaked beneath our feet. The store was packed with an assortment of antiques, old furniture, ornate mirrors, rusty tools, and countless other relics from the past. It felt like stepping into a different era, one that was frozen in time. We wandered through the aisles, our footsteps the only sound in the otherwise silent store. As we explored, strange things began to happen. Emma was the first to notice. "Did you guys hear that?" she whispered. We all stopped and listened. At first there was nothing, but then we heard it. A faint whispering, like a distant conversation. It was too soft to make out the words, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Probably just the wind," Jake said, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice wavered. We continued deeper into the store, and that's when the lights started to flicker. The old, dusty chandeliers overhead would blink on and off, casting the room in and out of darkness. Each time the lights went out, it felt like the shadows grew thicker, more oppressive. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I turned my flashlight toward it, but there was nothing there. Just an old mannequin draped in a tattered wedding dress. My heart pounded in my chest, and I tried to shake off the unease. We reached the back of the store, where an old, ornate mirror stood. Its surface was cloudy and cracked, but as we approached, I thought I saw something move within it. I shone my flashlight on the mirror, and my reflection stared back at me. But there was something wrong. My reflection's eyes seemed darker, and there was a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. "Guys, did you see that?" I asked, my voice trembling. What Lisa asked, her eyes wide with fear. "In the mirror," I said, pointing. "I saw someone behind me." Emma stepped up to the mirror and looked into it. Her eyes widened, and she gasped, "I see it too." We all looked into the mirror, and sure enough, there it was. A shadowy figure standing behind us. But every time we turned around, there was nothing there. The air grew colder, and the whispering grew louder. It was all around us now, an unintelligible cacophony of voices. The lights flickered more violently, and the shadows seemed to close in on us. "Let's get out of here," Lisa said, her voice shaking. We turned to leave, but the door we had come through was now shut tight. No matter how hard we pulled, it wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and the whispering turned into a chilling laughter. Suddenly, the laughter stopped, and the store fell into an eerie silence. Then, a loud crash echoed through the room, and the mannequin in the wedding dress toppled over. From behind it, a figure emerged. It was the same shadowy figure from the mirror, but now it was real, standing before us. The figure was tall and gaunt, with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. It moved toward us with an unnatural, jerky motion, like a puppet on strings. We backed away, our flashlights shaking in our hands. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty store. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a bony hand and pointed at us. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath misting in front of me. The whispering returned, louder and more insistent, filling my head with 1,000 voices. Jake tried to make a run for it, but he tripped over a pile of old books and fell to the floor. The figure was on him in an instant, its hollow eyes staring into his. Jake screamed, and the rest of us were frozen in fear. Emma grabbed a nearby chair and swung it at the figure. It passed right through, as if the figure were made of smoke. The figure turned its gaze on Emma, and she staggered back, her face pale with terror. I knew we had to do something. I remembered hearing that spirits were often bound to objects, and I wondered if the mirror was the source of its power. "The mirror," I shouted. "Break the mirror." Lisa grabbed a heavy brass candlestick and swung it at the mirror. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the figure let out a deafening scream. It writhed and twisted, then dissolved into a cloud of black smoke that dissipated into the air. The moment the figure vanished, the store fell silent. The lights stopped flickering, and the oppressive cold lifted. We stood there, shaken and exhausted, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Jake got to his feet, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "Let's get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. We didn't need any more convincing. We made our way to the door, which now opened easily. We stumbled out into the main concourse of the mall, gasping for air. The bustling sounds of the mall were a welcome relief, grounding us back in reality. We didn't speak much as we left the mall. Each of us was lost in our thoughts, trying to make sense of the experience. We had come face to face with something beyond our understanding, and it had left its mark on us. Over the next few days, we tried to go back to our normal lives, but the memory of that night haunted us. I couldn't sleep without hearing the whispers, and every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Emma and Jake were similarly affected, and even Lisa, who had always been the most rational among us, was visibly shaken. We decided to do some research on Old Man Harvey's antiques, hoping to find some answers. We discovered that the store had been closed for over a decade, following the mysterious disappearance of Old Man Harvey himself. There were rumors that he had dabbled in the occult, collecting cursed objects and performing dark rituals. It was said that he had unleashed something in the store, something that had consumed him and remained trapped within its walls. The more we learned, the more we realized how lucky we were to have escaped. The experience has changed us, making us more cautious and aware of the unseen forces that can lurk in the shadows. We promised each other that we would never go back to the store, and we warned others to stay away as well. The mall continued its slow decline, and Old Man Harvey's antiques remained sealed off, a dark secret in a dying place. The legend of the haunted store lived on, a chilling reminder of the dangers of curiosity and the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. It was a cool autumn night, and the air had a bite to it that seemed to seep into your bones. My friends and I had decided on a whim to take a late-night shopping trip to Westwood Mall. The mall was known for its extended hours, catering to night owls like us who enjoyed the quiet solitude that came with shopping at night. Little did we know, this trip would be anything but peaceful. The mall was about a 20-minute drive from our neighborhood. We piled into my beat-up sedan, cranking up the heater to ward off the chill. There was a sense of excitement and anticipation as we chatted about what we planned to buy and shared stories from our day. There were 4 of us: me, Kevin, Lisa, and Jenny. We had been inseparable since high school, and even though we were now in college, our bond remained as strong as ever. Kevin was the joker of the group, always ready with a witty remark or a prank. Lisa was the sensible one, often playing the role of the big sister, keeping us grounded. Jenny was the adventurous spirit, always pushing us to try new things. And then there was me, the storyteller, the one who loved to weave tales out of our everyday experiences. As we pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Westwood Mall, I couldn't help but feel a slight twinge of unease. The mall looked different at night. The bright, welcoming facade seemed more foreboding under the dim glow of the parking lot lights. Shadows stretched across the asphalt, and the usual hum of activity was replaced by an eerie silence. We entered through the main doors, the whoosh of the automatic doors breaking the silence. Inside, the mall was a stark contrast to its daytime hustle and bustle. The shops were all closed, their metal shutters pulled down tight, and the only light came from the dim overhead fixtures, casting long, dark shadows across the tiled floor. The echo of our footsteps seemed unnaturally loud in the emptiness. The air was still, and the usual background noise of chatter and music was absent, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. The occasional flicker of a fluorescent light added to the unsettling atmosphere. We made our way toward the food court, which was the only area still open, thanks to a 24-hour diner that served late-night coffee and snacks. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced around, but the corridors were empty, save for a lone janitor mopping the floor in the distance. As we approached the food court, I noticed a man standing near one of the closed kiosks. He was tall and thin, with a gaunt face and hollow eyes that seemed to follow our every move. He was dressed in a shabby, oversized coat that looked out of place in the otherwise clean and modern mall. "Do you guys see that?" I whispered, nodding in the man's direction. Kevin, always the skeptic, shrugged. "It's probably just a homeless guy. Let's just get our food and head out." Lisa frowned. "He looks off. Maybe we should just go back to the car." Jenny, ever the thrill seeker, grinned. "Come on, guys. We're here for an adventure, right? Let's just grab a coffee and see what happens." Reluctantly, we continued toward the diner. The man watched us as we passed, his eyes cold and unblinking. I felt a shiver run down my spine and quicken my pace, eager to put some distance between us and him. Inside the diner, the bright lights and familiar smells of coffee and pastries provided some comfort, but the unease lingered. We took a booth near the back, and I kept an eye on the entrance, half expecting the strange man to follow us in. We tried to distract ourselves with light conversation and jokes, but it was clear that everyone was on edge. Kevin kept glancing over his shoulder, Lisa was unusually quiet, and even Jenny's usual bravado seemed forced. "Did you guys notice how empty the mall is?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I know it's late, but it's never been this deserted before." Kevin nodded. "Yeah, it's weird. I didn't even see any security guards around." Jenny tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe they're all taking a break, or maybe we're just imagining things. After all, we're here for some fun, right?" Despite her attempt at reassurance, the tension in the air was palpable. We finished our coffee and decided to explore the mall a bit more before heading back. As we left the diner, I couldn't help but glance around for the strange man. He was nowhere to be seen, but the feeling of being watched persisted. We wandered through the darkened corridors, our footsteps echoing eerily in the silence. The flickering lights and long shadows only added to the creepy atmosphere. We passed by store after store, their dark interiors giving the illusion that something was lurking just out of sight. As we turned a corner, I felt a sudden rush of cold air and heard a faint whispering sound. I stopped in my tracks, straining to hear. "Did you guys hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. The others stopped and listened. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, but we couldn't make out any words. It was coming from a nearby hallway, one that led to a set of emergency exits. "Let's check it out," Jenny suggested, her eyes wide with excitement. Reluctantly, we followed the sound. The hallway was darker than the rest of the mall, and the whispering seemed to echo off the walls. As we neared the end, the sound abruptly stopped, and we were plunged into an unsettling silence. Just as we were about to turn back, the strange man from the food court stepped out of the shadows, blocking our path. His eyes were wild, and he had a twisted smile on his face. Looking for something, he asked, his voice a raspy whisper. We froze, too scared to move or speak. The man took a step closer, and I could see the madness in his eyes. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, rusty knife. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his smile widening. "This is my place now." Panic set in, and we instinctively backed away. Kevin tried to reason with him. "Look, man, we don't want any trouble. We'll just leave, okay?" The man shook his head, his smile never faltering. No, you can't leave. Not now." He lunged at us, and we scattered. Jenny screamed and ran down the hallway with Lisa close behind her. Kevin and I sprinted in the opposite direction, desperate to find an exit. We weaved through the dark corridors, the man's footsteps echoing behind us. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could barely catch my breath. We rounded a corner and found ourselves in front of a set of glass doors leading to the parking lot. Kevin threw his weight against the doors, but they wouldn't budge. "They're locked," he shouted, panic in his voice. I glanced around, looking for another way out. There was a service corridor to our left, and I grabbed Kevin's arm, pulling him toward it. "This way." We raced down the narrow corridor, the sound of the man's footsteps growing fainter behind us. We burst through a set of double doors and found ourselves in the loading dock area, surrounded by stacks of crates and pallets. Over there, Kevin pointed to a side door that led outside. We sprinted toward it, our hope renewed. We reached the door and pushed it open, the cool night air hitting our faces. We didn't stop running until we reached my car, parked at the far end of the lot. We jumped in and locked the doors, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. We sat in silence for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, and I couldn't shake the image of the man's twisted smile. Finally, Kevin broke the silence. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice shaking. "But we need to find Jenny and Lisa and get out of here. We drove around the parking lot, searching for any sign of Jenny and Lisa. After what felt like an eternity, we spotted them huddled together near the main entrance. They looked shaken but unharmed. We pulled up beside them, and they quickly got into the car. "Are you guys okay?" I asked, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Jenny nodded, her face pale. "Yeah, we're okay. But what about that guy? Did you see where he went?" "No," Kevin replied, his grip tight on the steering wheel. "We just need to get out of here and call the police." We sped out of the parking lot, the eerie glow of the mall fading into the distance. Once we were a safe distance away, we pulled over and called the authorities. We gave them a detailed account of what had happened, and they assured us they would investigate. In the days that followed, the incident haunted us. We couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and the memory of the man's twisted smile lingered in our minds. We learned from the police that they had found no trace of the man, and the mall's security footage had mysteriously gone missing. As we dug deeper into the mall's history, we discovered that it had a dark past. There had been several reports of strange occurrences and unexplained disappearances over the years. The mall had been built on the site of an old asylum, and many believed that the spirits of the patients still haunted the grounds. The experience left us scarred, and we vowed never to return to the mall. The once popular shopping center continued to decline, its eerie atmosphere driving away customers. It became a ghost town, a place where the past and present seemed to blur, and where the shadows held secrets that were best left undisturbed. The experience left a lasting impact on all of us. We couldn't shake the feeling of unease whenever we thought about that night, and we found ourselves constantly looking over our shoulders, as if the strange man might reappear at any moment. It was as if a part of the mall's dark history had followed us, lingering in the corners of our minds. Lisa, who had always been the most sensible among us, became more cautious and vigilant in her everyday life. She would often double-check the locks on her doors and windows, and she avoided going out alone after dark. The experience had shattered her sense of security, leaving her wary of strangers and unfamiliar places. Kevin, the joker of our group, found it difficult to make light of the situation. His usual humor and carefree attitude were replaced by a somber demeanor. He struggled with nightmares and would often wake up in a cold sweat, haunted by the image of the man's twisted smile. The incident had shaken him to his core, making him question the safety of places he had once taken for granted. Jenny, the adventurous spirit, found herself hesitating before embarking on new experiences. The thrill seeker in her had been dampened by the terror of that night. She became more introspective, often lost in thought as she tried to make sense of what had happened. The incident had instilled a sense of caution in her, reminding her that not all adventures were worth the risk. As for me, the storyteller, I found it difficult to put the experience into words. Writing had always been my way of processing events, but this was different. The fear and uncertainty we had faced were beyond anything I had ever encountered. It was as if the shadows of that night had seeped into my very being, making it difficult to convey the true horror of what we had experienced. Despite our efforts to move on, the memory of that night lingered like a dark cloud. The mall, once a place of excitement and entertainment, had become a symbol of fear and uncertainty. We couldn't escape the feeling that something malevolent still lurked within its walls, waiting for its next victim. The police investigation yielded no results, and the mall's decline continued. It became a place avoided by locals, a dark spot on the map where whispers of haunted stores and ghostly apparitions kept people away. The once thriving shopping center had become a desolate wasteland, a reminder of the past's hold on the present. The incident had left us with a deep sense of unease, a constant reminder of the unknown dangers that could lurk in the most familiar places. We had come face to face with a darkness that defied explanation, and it had left us forever changed. The shadows of that night continued to haunt us, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. In the years that followed, we tried to move on with our lives, but the memory of that night remained etched in our minds. We stayed in touch, our shared experience forging an unbreakable bond between us. We would occasionally gather and reminisce about our high school days, but the conversation would inevitably drift to that fateful night at the mall. As time passed, the mall continued to decay, its once bustling halls now silent and empty. It became a local legend, a place whispered about in hushed tones and avoided by all who knew its history. The strange man and the terror he had inflicted on us became part of the mall's dark lore, a chilling tale passed down through the years. The experience had left an indelible mark on us, a constant reminder of the fragility of safety and the ever-present threat of the unknown. We had faced our worst fears and come out the other side, forever changed by the darkness we had encountered. And though we had escaped the mall that night, the shadows of our past would forever linger, a chilling reminder of the night we ventured into the unknown and came face to face with the darkness that lurks just beyond the light.